Welcome to By Seat and By Saddle, seeing North America by car and by motorcycle. In 2011, my wife Sue and I had just retired, so with our newfound freedom and a thirst for adventure, we decided to leave home and embark on a series of retirement trips. We had a great little Suzuki motorcycle that we rode around home, and if we wanted to explore roads far from home, we carried it on a tiny Canadian snow bear trailer. In preparation for further distance traveling, I replaced the pillion cushion on the rear fender of the motorcycle with a garden tractor seat so that Sue would be completely comfortable over the many hours we spent on the bike. I also fastened some plywood walls and a roof to the trailer and installed a wash basin and a portable toilet to make us completely independent. We towed the trailer and motorcycle with a small 1.8-liter Pontiac Vibe. We folded down the rear seat in the Vibe, a great feature in that car, and added a foam mattress. With a small fan, a hanging light, and our laptop, we were as cozy and comfortable as sleeping in a mini motel. Later, we upgraded to an 803cc Suzuki and eventually to a 2.5-liter Toyota RAV4 car, but this will all be evident from the pictures and descriptions that follow. This is the story of one of our trips, a trip that took us south across Missouri, Texas, and into New Mexico. We crossed into the U.S. at Port Huron, Michigan in May of 2011 and drove south through Michigan and Indiana. Then we continued in a more southwesterly direction through Illinois and Missouri. We made a small detour south for some musical entertainment in Branson, Missouri, and then continued on directly south into Arkansas. Not far into Arkansas, we caught the I-40 and headed west through Oklahoma, across the Texas Panhandle and into New Mexico. We loved New Mexico and explored north as far as Los Alamos and south as far as Carlsbad. We took pictures of fascinating places and sights along the way. Finally, with great memories and a camera full of photos, we turned our car around and retraced our route back to Canada. The current story is divided into two parts. The part that follows is part one. You can load and watch the second part, as well as more of our trips, whenever you wish. This is a list of the things we saw in parts 1 and 2 to help you decide what you want to watch. Note that you can stop the video at any time for a closer look at any photograph. So come on and travel with us. We will take you along with words and photographs. It's a pleasure to share them with you. On May the 5th, 2011, we entered the U.S. at Port Huron and headed southwest as fast as our little 1.8-liter Vibe engine could pull us. It actually pulled very well, although we never had to worry about being cut for speeding. We followed I-69 to Indianapolis, continued south on I-70, and then entered Missouri at the famous Gateway to the West. It is a 630-foot arch built at St. Louis in 1965 and is the world's tallest. The public can ride to the top in a tram, but it also has 1,076 steps in each leg for use by maintenance and emergency staff. Continuing southwest on I-44, it soon became clear that we were on, or actually beside, a portion of the famous Route 66 highway. It was built in 1926 and connected Chicago to Los Angeles and Santa Monica, California. Route 66 crossed 8 states and 3 time zones and came to symbolize the freedom and adventure of the open road. It has been forever immortalized in music, print, and film. Major portions of the original Route 66 and its wayside attractions have been retained and are a cherished historical legacy. So we decided to get off the interstate and explore the historic route ourselves. Route 66 has acquired a huge cult following, with motorists from around the world, particularly motorcyclists, traveling its length as a pilgrimage to the road trip. Get Your Kicks on Route 66 was a popular rhythm and blues song for top musical artists, and Route 66 became the theme for a great television series called, appropriately, Route 66, starring Marty Milner and George Maharis. It ran from 1960 to 1964 and is a great memory. John Steinbeck called Route 66 the Mother Road in his 1939 book, The Grapes of Wrath. It was also called the Main Street of America because it went through the centers of so many American towns. Really nice to see great literature cited on a McDonald's wall. Almost everywhere we stopped, we were reminded that we were on the historic Route 66. At Springfield, we decided to leave Route 66 briefly and detour south for some musical entertainment in Branson. There were many options to choose from, but we chose the Icon Theater, with performances by tribute artists for the Platters, Bill Haley and the Comets, and Patsy Cline. They were terrific. The Comet performance of their biggest hit, Rock Around the Clock, featured two of their original artists. The lead singer in this picture is one of them. We think it's Al Rex, i.e. Albert Floyd Piccirilli. He would have been 82 years old. Branson is the ultimate tourist town with gigantic attractions. The building for the Titanic Museum is actually half the size of the original Titanic ship itself. Without a wide-angle lens, I had to climb a nearby hill to get back far enough to get the whole building in my picture. If you look carefully, you can see Sue standing patiently beside the iceberg waiting for me. The Hollywood Wax Museum in Branson included a Mount Rushmore of Hollywood faces that kept us guessing. Our guess for the leftmost face was John Wayne, and for the rightmost face, Charlie Chaplin. We needed help for the center two. The Ripley's Believe It or Not building is pretty eye-catching and fun. So is the low-flying twin-tail aeroplane, somewhat similar to a Lockheed Electra. It is probably related to some movie, but we couldn't identify it. We decided to continue south into Arkansas and then catch I-40 west across Oklahoma into Texas. We knew we were in Texas when everything got bigger. We had reached Amarillo and were at the famous Big Texan Steak Ranch. The menu includes a huge 72-ounce steak. That's 4.5 pounds or about 2 kilograms, along with bread, potato, beans, shrimp cocktail, and salad. If you can eat it all in 1 hour, it's free. We declined having Texas-sized indigestion, but we did have lunch there. It was great. We are now back on Route 66. Texas really does have a good handle on its Wild West history. The Cadillac Ranch is a popular stop outside Amarillo and has become something of a shrine for Route 66 pilgrims. After we arrived, we were joined by an international motorcycle tour group riding Route 66 from Chicago to Santa Monica. We talked with a Spanish rider from the Dominican Republic. When we mentioned the comfort of a car during bad weather, he replied, "Ah, yes, but the motorcycle provides food for the soul." The ranch is an artistic creation in which successive generations of Cadillacs were buried nose first, leaving only the rear half of the car exposed. Although explanations of the sculpture by the creators are philosophical, keeping track of the evolution of the automobile tail fin was apparently part of it. The cars are frequently painted and repainted, and public graffiti is, in fact, encouraged. We had never seen a horse motel before, and this one, just outside Amarillo, is sometimes said to be the first horse motel in the country, at least the first known along Route 66. This is a center pivot irrigation system in Texas. The sprinkler array can be up to 2,800 feet long. Electric motors on each span drive the sprinkler array in a circle about a central pivot where the water is pumped in. The system can distribute water, fertilizer, and pesticides over crops such as peanuts, sugarcane, potatoes, corn, and alfalfa. From Amarillo, it wasn't far and we were across the New Mexico state line and at Russell's Travel Center near Springer, New Mexico. Russell's also had a small museum that again focused on the Route 66 theme. Texas and New Mexico had not had rain since the previous September, and wildfires were devastating literally thousands of acres. This one, between Santa Rosa and Klein's Corners, had 3 days earlier forced closure of the I-40. We reached New Mexico State Road 3 and turned north to get a campsite at the Villanueva State Park. Road 3 was a small but paved winding road that for miles seemed almost devoid of human habitation. We were kind of relieved when, rounding a curve, we caught our first glimpse of Villanueva. Villanueva turned out to be one of a number of tiny, fascinating Spanish colonial villages on Highway 3 between the two interstate highways I-40 and I-25. It had a population of about 240 people. Our first impression was of a definitely rural village, but we really looked forward to having a chance to explore it. The community well in the center of town had a friendly, welcoming mural. We wondered if the public utilities in Villanueva actually pumped water from this well or whether it was just a nice place to display local talent. We had to stop to let what looked like a huge rattlesnake cross the road. Animals crossing the road where we live are usually squirrels and raccoons, never snakes, so we stopped to take a picture. From a pretty good distance, of course. We later showed our picture to a Villanueva park ranger, and he said it was probably a bull snake, which is a rattlesnake look-alike. The campground at Villanueva State Park is just beside the beautiful Pecos River, which is a major tributary of the Rio Grande. In a later trip, we took a picture of the exact location where the Pecos flows into the Rio Grande. All campsites had Adobe-style picnic shelters, with flat roofs supported on sturdy horizontal beams. The design is reminiscent of typical 16th century construction. Crumbling ruins of actual buildings with this design are still common in the area and will be shown later. A sign behind our campsite indicated that this area along the Pecos River was a route for the conquistadors. One could really feel the rich heritage of Spanish history here. The exploits of the men listed on this sign can be found in a book titled The Last Conquistador, Juan de Onate and the Settling of the Far Southwest, written by Mark Simmons and published by the University of Oklahoma Press. In it, there is a description of a Spanish expedition to interact with the Pueblo natives. The Hernando Gallegos listed in this sign was responsible for keeping the official diary of the expedition. Interestingly, Gallegos was still a common name in Villanueva. After setting up our campsite, it was time to start exploring the roads of the Pecos River Valley on our motorcycle and climbing the surrounding hills. We stopped at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, which was built in 1816, only 8 years after the village itself was founded. There were no people around that we could see to talk to, but Sue immediately got a warm greeting from a couple of Villanueva inhabitants of the four-footed variety. Right beside the church was an open-air shrine or grotto built in the 1950s to honor Our Lady of Guadalupe. Unfamiliar with shrines, we found it interesting and attractive. Villanueva also had a small general store. When we were leaving the store, a group of motorcyclists rode up. They looked hard at our little 250cc Suzuki, and one finally said, "You two rode all the way from Canada on that?" We could have had some fun with that question, but somehow the long hair and black jackets sucked every ounce of humor out of us, so we simply confessed we had brought the motorcycle along on a trailer. Turned out they were really nice, and we had a nice chat. A few miles outside town, there is a small family winery, which fit right in with its Pecos River Valley surroundings. Other interesting local sites included a farmer's water wheel and a farmhouse with an old tractor. Nearby were some abandoned buildings that were witness to the distant Spanish colonial past. The primary construction material was clearly adobe bricks with wood frames around windows and doors. Adobe is the Spanish word for mud brick, and adobe bricks are a sun-dried mixture of mud and straw or dung. Roofs were supported by large horizontal beams or logs. Adobe construction was used for centuries in Old Spain and was apparently also being used by Native Americans in the Southwest when the Europeans arrived. One interesting building was a combination of adobe and timber construction with buttresses reinforcing the walls. Buttresses, and especially flying buttresses, which look more like an arch than a gusset, are defining features of Gothic cathedrals in Europe. These crumbling buildings created a real sense of connection to the past. For us, the old truck in this photo added perfectly to a feeling of traveling back to a time forgotten. Our little motorcycle was perfect for following winding roads and climbing the mesas and hills. We never tired of the views going up and down the roads on these hills. The snow on the distant mountains were a lovely horizon and a compelling invitation to continue our travels. The plateaus of some mesas were used to graze cattle and had pastures that wouldn't have needed much fencing. However, cattle grates or grids were needed to keep the livestock from descending the mesa and exploring the wider region on their own. The original name of Villanueva was La Cuesta, which means the hill or the slope, and undoubtedly referred to the hill beside the town. We climbed a path up the Villanueva Hill to get an overview of the river valley. At the top of the hill there was an overlook point. The sign had fallen off. The view from the top was well worth the climb. We noticed a sign or two in this region to watch out for rattlesnakes. For us, the advice to avoid them was totally unnecessary. In the 1794 San Miguel de Vado land grant, The Spanish government granted about 315,000 acres of land to a small group of settlers, a number of whom were Native Americans. Our motorcycle was also great for exploring the other little Spanish colonial villages in the Pecos River Valley. The villages had names like El Pueblo and Ribera. In Ribera, we enjoyed enchiladas at the La Risa Cafe, a little family-run restaurant, once a 100-year-old home. A church and community center in El Pueblo boasted some lovely wall murals. The murals were clear evidence of intense pride in their rural community. Needing gas for our motorcycle, the only station we could find on State Road 3 was about 10 miles away. It was a bit of a worry that one of the nozzles was repaired with duct tape and that another appeared to be garden hose, but the motorcycle ran just fine, so the gas must have been okay. We also rode the motorcycle up to Pecos, a little town of about 1,500 people in San Miguel County, where we found the remains of an old Spanish mission church built in 1717. This church was built on the debris of an older, larger adobe church built in 1625, but was destroyed by the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. This church was also built of adobe or mud brick. The fact that the mud brick walls are still standing 300 years later is a real testament to their durability. Standing inside the walls, it was fun to think of what it must have been like when services were held inside. The thickness of the walls and the absence of windows probably kept the interior warm in winter and cool in summer, and with oil lamps, candles, religious symbols, and music, the atmosphere inside would likely have been quite compelling. The 1717 church was built in the middle of Pecos Pueblo, a community of native Pueblo people also called Siquay Pueblo, which means the village of 500 warriors. At one time, they numbered in the thousands. The ruins of Pecos Pueblo consist of fragments of low stone and adobe walls that still remain. The site was actually abandoned in 1838. Another interesting remnant of Pueblo native culture and lifestyle is the kiva. Kivas were underground structures used for meetings, rituals, and ceremonies. They had a fire pit, an air inlet vent, and an air deflector which protected the fire from the incoming air. Kivas were accessed through a roof opening via a ladder. This photo shows the ladder, air inlet vent, air deflector, and fire pit. A view from inside the kiva as Sue joins me. Most experts say that women were traditionally barred from entering kivas, so I guess Sue is pretty lucky. Kivas would have been too hot to occupy without a ventilation system. Kiva ventilation consisted of an underground ventilation shaft running more or less horizontally for a few feet away from the kiva and then vertically to the surface. This slide shows the ventilation shaft opening at ground level outside. Ventilation air enters and flows down into the kiva, replacing the heated air escaping through the roof access opening. This is an horno, the Spanish word for oven, an adobe brick outdoor oven that can bake 22 loaves of bread at a time. A wood fire is started inside, and after the fire burns out, the ashes and embers are removed and the dough to be baked is put in. Now it was time to explore whatever there was to see a little further north. This is the end of Part 1. In Part 2, we ride up the Santa Fe Trail and visit the capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe. We learn a lot about the history of the U.S. nuclear program at Los Alamos and are amazed by the accomplishments of the Pecos Pueblo natives at the Bandolier National Monument. Later, we check out aliens in Roswell and go through the Carlsbad Caverns. On the way home, we also ride through covered bridges in Indiana.